today we have Dr. Revak, who's going to make a presentation on digitizing your old slides and negatives, scanning, and I know there's been a lot of questions about this over the years, and we never really had anybody with the expertise to really review it with us, and so I think this should be a great day. Also, George at the end is going to take a few minutes and show you a project that he also scanned and put together. Okay, you're all set.
Okay.
Everybody, oh, by the way, Conrad was nice enough to provide us with his keynote presentation, which I converted into a PDF file and send it out to everybody, because in case you didn't all have keynote, you know, if it was a keynote and you didn't have keynote, you wouldn't have been able to watch it. And that was, I think it was an excellent move on his part. So if, I hope most of you took advantage of the fact that that was sent out to everybody in the discussion group. That's the advantage of belonging to our discussion group, is we send you out a lot of advance information about the meeting. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, George. It's been about 4 years since I've been here, and George and Jerry are a very dedicated bunch. I've been involved in photography for many years, and this is a culmination of thousands of slides that I have to go back and scan. I'm just only partially through. It's going to be a long task, but I also see Bob Kennedy in the audience here, and he's the person who should be giving this talk. Bob, I hope you'll bear with me. We're going to start this talk early here. There are going to be a lot of slides and a lot of information that you can't possibly retain it all, so do use the PDF or get a file from me. We're going to start with the eye. The eye is sensitive to red, green, and blue. It has specific sensors for each color, and all colors are derived from these three sensors. And almost all digital and photo systems are based on these sensors. I understand that Sony has a additional sensor, which is for yellow, and that makes some sense because it would enlarge the color space. But anybody who has some experience with that, they're welcome to comment. Also, interrupt me at any point during this talk and to ask questions. White is a combination of all these colors. What do we want to do when we scan? We want to reproduce everything, we want to change nothing, we want to add nothing, and we want to remove dust and scratches. Let's consider scanner types. There are all types of scanner machines. Some take a picture of the picture. That's not recommended. Camera sensors are not designed for copying in that fashion. Flatbed scanning is not particularly good for scanning because intervening glass reduces the resolution of reflections from the glass. And a truly good scanner will have no glass between the illumination source and the sensor. Some scanners use fluorescent light, and there may be holes in the spectrum of the fluorescent light. A good scanner uses LED illumination and line-by-line scanning. At some point, you're going to want to put your slides on some sort of permanent source, and you may think that DVDs are good, but not necessarily. Some DVDs are notoriously poor. The reusable ones are not good at all. They'll fade quickly. Some DVDs lose information in just a few years. There are some that are advertised as archival quality, and that's what I recommend. If you get a DVD from a vendor, it's not going to be that quality, and you might want to load it onto your computer and then load it onto your own DVD of your own choice.
Conrad, do you know of any particular brands that are good?
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
Okay? And there's another choice that's just emerging now. Put in, you order from a vendor, you give them hundreds of slides, and they process them and send it back to you on a hard drive. And hard drives are so cheap now. You can go to Costco and get a 1 terabyte hard drive for $64. The vendors here charge around $100. But it's sort of convenient to have an extra hard drive when you place your order for your photos. And a lot of them have that option now. Here's one company called Archival Methods. And they're concerned with archiving films, anything. You can go to their website and find out all sorts of goodies from them. Let's start with the human eye now. The eye has the 3 sensors that we've discussed. And the color sensors are cones. If you look at them under a microscope, they're cone-shaped. That's why they're called cones. The other sensors are rods. Rods take over in dim light, and you lose color perception in dim light. And the reason is to extend the range of vision. Rod sensors are more sensitive to blue. That's why airport runway lights are blue, and that's why cockpit pages are red. The eye is an incredible device. It can see over 16 million to 1 range of intensities. And we have the job of mimicking the eye, and it's not easily done. Here's our pilot looking out. Let's hope that he can see that oncoming plane. He has his red gauges to guide him. The cones. We have three sensors in the eye. We have blue sensors, green sensors, red. Each of them contributes a signal that the brain processes, and the size of the signal is shown in each curve. Sky blue would be a combination of blue to this point and green to that point, and a little bit of contribution of red. Green would be mostly green, but there would also be a red contribution and just a little bit of blue contribution. So that's the combination of elements in our eye that produce the sensation we want to see. Color is an artificial thing that our eye generates. There's no natural color in nature. It's just the spectrum of images, reflectances. 300 years ago, Isaac Newton split light into all of its colors, and then he realized that he could bend it around, and the blues and the pinks and the reds would be close to each other, with the purples and the violets and the purple pinks on either side. This produced a useful concept because the yellows are complementary to the violets, the greens are complementary to the pinks, and the whites are in the center. The saturated images, the saturated colors are on the periphery of the color wheel, and as you add more white, the colors become less saturated. Now we have scanning choices. In our scanner, we want to choose resolution, we want to choose scratch and dust removal, we have a choice of JPEG or TIFF format, we have a choice of 8-bit or 16-bit color depth, and we want to decide if we want to restore old images. The terminology that I'm going to use is based on samples per inch and dots per inch. Samples per inch is what the scanner does. The scanner is sampling what it sees. Dots per inch is what the printer does. The printer is printing dots. And dots per inch is often used interchangeably when it should be samples per inch, but you can think of them as nearly equal. What do we want in terms of resolution? Well, a printed piece of paper or a printed film ideally would have about 300 dots per inch. What do we need to get that goal? Well, we have a 35 millimeter slide that's far too small to look at. So if we wanted to make a 4 by 6 inch print, magnification would be 4-fold. This 1 inch becomes 4 inches, 1.5 inches becomes 6 inches. To get that, we would have to magnify 4 times 300 or 1,200 samples per inch. And for an 8 by 12 inch print, we would have to have 2,400 samples per inch. Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
What are our magnification limits? Well, here's our scanner sampling, and scanner can sample at 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Here's our dots per inch on the print that we want. We might want 300, we might accept 200, we might want to accept 100. If we go to 300 dots per inch and scan at, say, 2,000 samples per inch, the biggest magnification we could do would be a 7 by 10 inch print. We could do a larger print if we wanted to do 10 by 15. We could do still larger print if we were happy with 100 dots per inch. Here's an original picture. And it's a scanned image now. Here it is at 1,000 samples per inch. Here is at 3,000. Let me see how that projects. Reasonably well, I guess. We've lost the hair on our forehead here. It's kind of gray. It's sharp here. It's crisp. The eyebrow is dull here and crisp here. And you may say, well, maybe I could get by with 1,000 samples per inch. But there's also the phenomenon of low contrast resolution. How well can an image be produced when the object itself we're taking a picture has low contrast? And you look at a freckle pattern under her eye. It's not here. Skin texture is not here. That's low contrast resolution that's absent. Now, what are our limits on scanner resolution? The problem is that file sizes increased enormously. 3,000 samples per inch requires 4 times as much file space as 1,500 samples per inch. You can easily read 50 or 100 megabytes per image. So that would require many gigabytes of storage. But today, storage is not a problem. A terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes, a gigabyte is 1,000 megabytes, and it goes on down, and a byte is 8 bits. So we've gone up this enormous spectrum of storage that we can do now with no trouble. Once again, I mentioned hard drive storage because it's so cheap. Theoretical limit is about 4,000 samples per inch. You don't gain anything by sampling at a higher rate because other factors become limiting. 300 dots per inch that we're hoping for is based on a viewing distance of 18 inches. If you're looking at a print that's on a wall 36 inches away, you could probably get by with 150 dots per inch. Projectors are often limited. I'm sort of surprised that the projector does as well as it does here because there's often a big loss just in the process of projecting. Another thing to consider is that the camera lens itself may be limiting. And often with some point-and-shoot cameras or old cameras, they just didn't have a lens that would do the job, and you just magnify an empty image that doesn't have any more information. That's not worth it. What file sizes do we reach? If we're doing something like 3,000 samples per inch, with an 8-bit JPEG file, it would take about 8 megabytes. If we were to do this as a TIFF file, and I'll go into what the differences between JPEG and TIFF as we go on here. The file triples almost. As we go to 16-bit TIFF file, it's even bigger. So here we are at 65 megabytes to get one picture. Often your point-and-shoot cameras will produce like an 8 megabyte file. So we're quite a bit bigger than what you get with a lot of cameras today. Scratch and dust removal. I consider that absolutely essential. And by good luck, all of the dyes used in color films are transparent to infrared light, but the dust and scratches are not. So what the scanner can do is record all of the scratches and dust on a separate infrared channel. And then the software looks back to the other 3 channels and averages pixels around each speck of dust and around each scratch. Therefore, it's been eliminated all those defects. But the important thing is that if you have any other dots on the picture, if you have any thin lines on the picture, they're not affected because only those ones that are picked up on the infrared channel are affected. I really consider it very, very necessary. Here's an old Kodachrome 50 years ago, loaded with scratches here and dust in the sky everywhere. But here it is after processing. You can look at it again, before and after. All that is gone. Now the texture of the grain in the wood is not affected because that was on the emulsion. It wasn't a scratch or piece of dust anywhere. Here, the image is designed to show all the scratches and dust here on a regular scan. A lot of that is occurring over the head and forehead and places that you don't want. So you can't do without scratch and dust removal. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's with good handling, of course, you can decrease scratches. I find that dust is just pervasive. It's hard to blow off, it's hard to wipe off, it's hard to do anything with. And if you clean it up, it's going to pick up dust again just from static charges. So that's really necessary. What can you do with, what film types can you do with scratch and dust removal? Well, you can do all Electrochrome, all Fujichrome, all Kodacolor, Kodachrome in most cases, but not all. It's not for black and white because black and white negatives are based on leaving silver particles behind, silver halide particles. And these particles will absorb the infrared, so you can't use it for old black and white negatives. Now comes this big question, JPEG or TIFF? JPEG and TIFF are 2 common formats for recording images. JPEG is the common one that most cameras use, and it is universal, really. The color depth is only 8 bits, and that produces 256 shades of either red, green, or blue. And you may think it's adequate, but it's not. In my old days of computer tomography, way back in 1972, we had scans that were 8 bits deep. And what happened is you got sudden jumps and dividing lines between, say, 7 bits and 8 bits. You'd see a division. It was distracting. And the manufacturers changed that and went up to 10 bits deep. And that's really a factor of 4 in terms of the number of shades. So it really improved things considerably. The JPEG also has the fact of lossy compression. It's a strange algorithm because every time you open and close the image, you recompress it and lose a little more data. And pretty soon there's a loss of detail that you didn't expect. And I've seen this phenomenon described, and I've seen pictures of the phenomenon, but I don't see it with iPhoto or Preview. I took a preview image and I opened and closed it 100 times and compared it to a TIFF that I had right beside it. And I really didn't see that loss. But in principle, you could lose a lot of information with a JPEG. And the other thing is, in the process of recording a JPEG image, the camera throws away an enormous amount of information. It just throws it away. It's gone forever. You can't do anything about it. So the trouble is that you can't really edit it like you want. It would have helped if the original JPEG had been at least 10 bits deep. TIFF is a nicer format. You can get 8 or 16 bits. You can get 65,000 shades of the colors. Compression is lossless. The disadvantage, of course, is the files are much larger. Editing is much, much easier. You can upload your images to some vendors, but not all. Costco will accept the TIFF images, Shutterfly doesn't. One workaround is the fact to do all your editing in TIFF, and then at the very end, you just convert to a JPEG. And if you're an iPhoto, what you can do is to do that, make that conversion. It's pretty simple. You simply export an image, and when the export window comes up, it gives you a option to export as a JPEG. So you just export it as a JPEG and then upload that to whatever service you're using to do your prints. Now, we have to consider the dynamic range of the device that we're looking at. The human eye has a dynamic range of 24 f-stops. Now, an f-stop is a factor of 2 in the level of illumination. So, one stop is twice as much, 2 stops is 2 times 2 is 4, 5 stops is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 with 32, and so it goes on up. These are just equivalent values. 1 stop is equivalent to a range of 32. 24 stops is equivalent to a 16 million to 1. So how on earth do we reproduce everything the eye can see? It's pretty difficult. There's a fortunate mechanism that goes on here. Does everybody understand what an f-stop is? Yeah. Good, okay. The eye at any instant will see 6.5 f-stops. So whether the illumination is bright or moderate or dim, it sees over a range of 6.5 stops. And that 6.5 stops slides up and down over that 24 stop range. It's really quite clever. But we as photographers are trying to duplicate what the eye is doing, and it's difficult. A good digital camera will have 12 to 14 f-stop range. Kodachrome slide will have about 10. Kodacolor negative has a little bit better range. It's about 12. JPEG definition is, JPEG is 8 by definition. TIFF is 8 or 16. I'm using a Nikon Super Cool Scan, and I can get a 16 f-stop range. Color restoration is difficult. I can't give you much advice on color restoration because fortunately, or whatever, most of the images I've scanned and obtained, I've managed to keep in pretty good shape, and I don't have a real problem with fading and loss of saturation and loss of color. The scanning services will ask if you want color restoration, and they say they will give it to you, but I'm not sure. You can also get custom restoration, which is more expensive, but you can go online and take a look at the vendors and decide if you want restoration or not. Some of the services say they do it automatically. I'm not sure what the quality is like. Here's an image with no restoration. And this is just an old Kodachrome that was scanned. Here it is with color and fading restoration. It's too much red. He's become a redneck. He's a little bit too red here and here. The greens and the blues aren't too much a thing. And this is done just by clicking a checkbox on the viewing scanner. But you can decide whether or not you want to do restoration. If you want a good job, it's difficult. There's the original. There's the red photo. Online services. The Scan Cafe. They're the biggest ones. And they're on probation with me, and right now I'd give them an F. Maybe they'll come through, but I'm not happy with them. Well, first of all, the turnaround is 6 to 8 weeks, but it will probably be longer than that. It's processed in India.
Oh,
They do have expedited question. Do have expedited service available. They do promise 3,000 or 4,000 samples per inch, which is nice. And you can get DVD or hard drive storage, dust removal. And they say they will do red eye removal, basic editing, color corrections, etc. At 22 cents a slide, I don't know how much editing they can possibly do. I mean, they have somebody there manually doing this editing job. I have a feeling that a lot of your pictures are going to have to require some additional editing. Scan My Photos have been rated good and bad by reviewing services. New York Times rated them good, others not so good. Here's a few more vendors. Here's two that I like. One is Digify. This is a scanner in New York City. They're a boutique scanner. The nice thing about them is that they can actually talk to a real person who speaks English. And the slides are a little bit expensive, but the service is so personal, it's really helpful. Locally, Kristen Goodman and her husband Dennis, their husband-wife team, do scanning. Primarily they scan old photos, and the price is not unreasonable, $100 for 500 photos. She sends the slides out, and I don't have any direct experience with what they're doing, but visiting their store and talking to Dennis in particular, they know what they're doing. I think you do well if you're in doubt by...
You know where she sends her slides to?
I'm sorry?
You know where she sends her slides?
where does she send her slides?
Somebody in Connecticut, I don't know. I guess she's done through her own quality control and defined, said this person in Connecticut is the one to do. But it's easy to just go online with this address and check them out or give them a phone call. You get a lot of information quickly and locally. Anything else? This was review in 2012. Scan Cafe was rated tops. GoPhoto not so. GoPhoto okay. Scan Digital down here. And I'll tell you my problems that I have with Scan Cafe. But if you do have a scanner, there is a software that's available that gives you an enormous amount of flexibility and choices. This is my ViewScan for about $80. An alternate software is Silverfast by a German company, but they're more editing than they are scanning. So those are my two outside experiences. Digify, which I had a good experience with. We had some movies that we couldn't open on the Mac, and we called them, and they went through a step-by-step procedure telling me what to do, and the problem was solved. I recommend them. Scan Cafe I had a problem with. It was only 6 weeks ago that I sent them a batch of slides just to see what would happen. And they botched them left and right. My order was, I also used USA service rather than sending them to India. You pay a little bit extra to have service in this country. Routinely, they promised 3,000 dots per inch, but they actually gave me 2,000 dots per inch. They gave me a random mix of raw TIFF and processed TIFF images. I wanted a complete set of each. They didn't give me any 16-bit TIFF, which I wanted. I told that we had multiple phone calls back and forth. It was 2 weeks before they would even acknowledge a mistake. I sent the slides back again, and at 6 a.m. this morning, they told me that my order was complete. Well, I haven't had time to review what the slides show, but perhaps later I can show you, let you know what the results were. I mentioned again Dennis Goodman. I just look, he understands everything that he's doing, and he's doing it personally. So I think that's a good choice locally. Now, what happened with Scan Cafe? Well, first of all, here on the right is the info panel. You just click Get Info on any slide that you've selected in Mac, and you'll get a panel like this. Here is the image that I had in question, and I looked at the info panel and I said, this is only 4.3 megabytes. And I said, that's too small. You can't do a 3,000 sample per inch scan and come up with only 4.3 megabyte file. Then I looked at the dimensions, and the dimensions are approximately 2,000 by 3,000 pixels. Well, those aren't the number of pixels you would get with a 3,000 sample per inch scan. Number of pixels is samples per inch times the height or width of the slide. The 35 millimeter slide is 1 by 1.5 inches, and 2,000 samples per inch would give you 2,000 by 3,000 pixels, which is almost exactly what this is here. It's almost certain that they gave me 2,000 dots per inch, and they advertise all the time that they're giving 3,000. And so after this long period of back and forth, they admitted there was a problem. They said it was a local problem. They've solved it. It was a quality control issue. But what you don't know is how many thousands of images went out at impaired resolution. And the average user isn't going to look at it with the same detail that I looked at it. But keep in mind that you might keep this slide in mind for any slide you get back from anywhere. Are they really scanning at the conditions that they say they're scanning at? Any questions so far? Okay. Here is a Scan Cafe image, one of the ones that they sent me at 2,000 samples per inch. And the reason I chose that was the blades of grass become resolution patterns. The sharpness of the grass will tell us how good it is. Also, the gravel becomes a low contrast resolution measure. Here is the Scan Cafe image up here, and here is the Nikon scan that I did myself. I think I give Scan Cafe a little edge right here, but I think in the gravel, I think the Cool Scan does better at low contrast resolution. Again, this is at 2,000 samples per inch, not what they said they would do. You're going to want to edit, because what's going to happen is you're going to get your slides back from wherever, and you're going to say, I don't like what I see. It looks okay, but those telephone poles are tilted, Grandpa's standing in the shade, and there's somebody in the corner that's a stranger that I don't recognize. I want to cut him out of the film. And no matter what you think, you can't just take your slides back, and the criteria is different than 30 years ago when we had to be happy with whatever image came off the film. Okay, now we come into scanning again. I like it because there's no lost data, there's editing freedom, and you might not want to scan now, you might not want to edit now, or you might not want to edit now, but later on you might, your grandchildren might. If you do 16-bit TIFF files, you have a lot more dynamic range to play with, and that will be handy for some purposes. Here is a JPEG image that Scan Cafe sent, and I did basic editing to produce it as well as I could. Here is a Scan Cafe 8-bit TIFF image, and I did the same basic editing. And we look nearly the same. For some reason, there's a little bit of a red shift, and I'm just a little bit redder here, but I was sunburned, so I think this is a better representation. And what you can see is the low contrast resolution. Now this is an 8-bit TIFF. It would have been better at 16. We would have had more room to play around. The texture of the stones is better with a TIFF image than it is with a JPEG. The contrast is actually a little bit better too, because I was able to adjust the contrast more easily with curves rather than the sliders that iPhoto gives you. But even at 8 bits, the TIFF image is a little better. At 16 bits, which they didn't give me, it would have been a lot better. Here is a TIFF image that's grossly overexposed. This happens to be a digital photo image, but the same would be true of a scan that's a TIFF. What we see is the snow is a whiteout, and she is also overexposed. Her ski pants are barely visible. If this were a JPEG image, you would be stuck. You couldn't do anything with it, because all the information that's contained in the white images is thrown away. It's gone forever. It's discarded. When your camera takes a picture, it actually takes a picture of a raw photo, and the JPEG is extracted from that raw photo, but all the rest of what could have been available is no longer there. What did we do to get this? Two things we did. One is all of the white was recovered.
So this was, you're working with TIFF?
Well, this is basically a raw photo,
Raw.
raw slash TIFF.
Okay.
Okay.
So raw and TIFF are pretty much the same.
Well, raw is even rawer than TIFF, because raw has no correction at all, except that you have to keep in mind that scanner raw is not the same thing as camera raw. And also there's an interesting, camera raw, for instance, has to correct the greens, because the greens are inherently doubled in a raw image, but the camera will automatically correct it.
So the camera does some direction in raw
A little bit.
correction.
A wee little bit.
And in TIFF, more?
Oh.
Well, they don't, actually, my cameras don't take TIFF.
No, they don't. I mean, the cameras all take raw.
Right.
But then you convert to TIFF, because if you're looking at a raw image, it's very hard to look at. It has no contrast. It's dark looking. So you have to convert TIFF, have to convert the raw to something. Actually, iPhoto converts it to a JPEG. So you're always looking at a JPEG, but you're processing a TIFF, if that makes any sense. And when you export, you usually export as a TIFF from iPhoto.
You export from iPhoto, it exports as a TIFF?
You can choose that.
You can choose it, right?
Yeah. Okay. But anyhow, getting back to this, so we did two steps. One is we recovered the snow, and two, we reduced the exposure.
The scanner, you did that with the scanner, that recovery, or with the?
I chose this photograph because it was dramatic. It shows what you can do by proper editing of any TIFF image.
But where did you do it?
But it was a camera image. It was a digital camera image.
But where did you do the correction?
On aperture.
On aperture.
Okay, I'm showing you right here. Okay,
Did that
here's,
answer your question, Don?
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry.
okay, here's the recovery slider. So you recover all that snow just by moving the slider. And whether you're dealing with Aperture or Lightroom or Photoshop, they all have the equivalent recovery slider. Unfortunately, iPhoto does not, which is a bummer. You wish you could do it. But then, and here's the other slider. You want to reduce the exposure, you want to increase the recovery. And that's what you do with I use Aperture just because it links so well with iPhoto. But Lightroom and Photoshop are obviously better editing software. I'm going to mention this in advance because here are some of these enhancing tools. Vibrancy is a clever tool, and it is a slider operation here. I'm going to mention also the white balance, and here's a medicine dropper here. Here is a temperature adjustment here, and I'll go into both of those in more detail as we go along here. There again, you see that. That's what you can do.
And that was all done in Aperture, in Aperture.
In Aperture, but Aperture edited what was stored in iPhoto. I don't use Aperture for any primary storage. I store everything in iPhoto. But iPhoto links easily to Aperture. And in fact, Lightroom links easily too, and so does Photoshop. But they become progressively more complex.
And the original photo was taken in RAW?
Yeah, it has to be taken in RAW because you couldn't possibly edit that fashion in a JPEG.
Thank you.
Okay. The things we're going to do, we want to crop, and that's easily enough. You just click onto a corner or an edge and drag it till you get what you want. The sliders, I suggest playing with the sliders to get what you want. Exposure and brightness sliders, shadow and highlight sliders, and vibrancy. Now, vibrancy saturates the unsaturated areas. And if you want to get blue skies out of a dull image, you add some vibrancy. For whatever reason, Apple didn't include that in iPhoto. You have to go up a step or two up in the software. Here's the original scan on the left and vibrancy on the right. You notice that the sky is much bluer. The tiles are more distinct. You'll notice that people don't change much. The dog doesn't change much because those are already pretty well saturated, but the other stuff was not. If I had simply tried to reduce the exposure, it would have taken away that appearance of a bright sunny day. So reducing exposure is not an alternative here. It's better to add some vibrancy to give the colors that you want. Again, here's your vibrancy panel down here. Just slide back and forth. Contrast and saturation as they work in iPhoto are okay. There's some other more direct means of doing that produce better results. Tint is important for removing a color cast. And particularly if you have something in the image that is a known white or a known gray. Somebody's wearing a grayish sweater and you say, I know that's gray. Or there's an object in the picture that's white and you say, I know that's white. That gives you a starting point for correcting an image. Recovery, we've shown what you can do with recovery in a TIFF image or a raw image. Definition and sharpness are useful. They're sort of edge enhancement algorithms, but don't overdo them or you get some strange halos. Now, white balance and color temperature. When film was devised 30, 40, 50 years ago, color film, well, it goes way back, but at any rate, they realized then that there were daylight viewing conditions and there were indoor viewing conditions. And they designed color film to compensate. If you bought a roll of film, it would say daylight. Or if you bought a roll of film, it would say tungsten. And those are the conditions that you were supposed to use the film under. So what happens here is that the illumination varies widely. And the eye is such a clever device, it compensates automatically. Red is red regardless of what the conditions are in the room. I perceive your red sweater, your blue sweater, whatever, just automatically. My eye just adjusts. Film can't do that. So we have the phenomenon of color temperature. That's the emissions emitted by a black body at a specified temperature. The sun is considered a black body, and higher color temperatures have more blue, lower color temperatures have more red. Outdoor color temperatures vary widely, with time of day and shade and the weather. Digital cameras compensate pretty much automatically for color temperature. So you don't have to worry about it with the digital cameras so much. But you do with old film. We get some grossly wrong color temperatures, and you'll see the difficulty of it. Indoor temperatures are roughly 3,000 degrees Kelvin. You've all seen those old photos with the class play, and you take pictures of Junior there, and everything looks red. And that's because somebody may have taken the picture with daylight film in indoor conditions, and that's why you get that red effect. So what you have to do is get rid of the color imbalance as much as possible. This pelican is blue, everything is blue. The film was designed for 500 degrees Kelvin. The actual color temperature on this particular day, it was a bright sunny day with shadows in an alley. That's the conditions in which the temperature goes up. So we can make a color temperature correction with a slider. Just slide it to get what you want. Here's the sliders, and here's your temperature correction down here. This is from my photo now. So right here you can make a correction. Very simple, just slide back and forth to get what you want. Okay, here is an original scan. It's really well balanced just as it is, but let's say that for some reason we want to change the color temperature. Here's what we can do. If we lower the temperature, we're telling the computer that this scan was actually taken under conditions of 4,000 degrees Kelvin. Well, the computer says, oh, that's less than the film is designed for. I have to add more blue. So the computer adds more blue and produces an overly blue image. If I change the color temperature to 6,000 degrees Kelvin, I get not so blue and more red. So that slider of color temperature is important. This is something else you're going to encounter in those old images quite often, which is the fluorescent light effect. Fluorescent light is not a black body. It's predominantly in the green. It has other strange peaks and valleys in the spectrum it emits. So she has a ghastly look on her face. Everything looks green. She has a green sweater. And what do we do with something like this? Well, we know that the white cup is white. Here's a milk bottle here. There's probably some white on the bib. We could use that as a reference point. And using that as a reference point, we can make a correction. And again, here is the medicine dropper. When you click on this medicine dropper, it changes what your arrow looks like. Your arrow becomes a crosshair. And your crosshair then becomes something you will choose on the image. Here it is here. Here's the cup. Here's a magnified view of the cup. Here's the crosshair. And that's what we're going to say. We're going to define that as white. And notice here are the printer's colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow. There's a lot more cyan than there is magenta or yellow. Those three should be equal in a properly balanced film. So all we have to do is one click on that white cup. We made a correction. This is what we end up with. Okay? Very simple to do. You're going to want to do it on those old films. You can't avoid it. This could be improved some more. It's still a little too blue, but it's definitely pretty good. The green sweater has turned blue. The green jeans are now blue jeans. It's a much better picture overall.
How would you get the blue out of there?
You have to go to, you have to separate the three colors and RGB sliders and reduce the, I don't think you can do it in iPhoto. You'd have to go to Lightroom or Photoshop.
Not aperture.
I don't think so. Is that right? Bob, do you have any
I'm
comments?
not using Aperture, I'm using Photoshop,
Okay,
and that's what you do in Photoshop.
yeah. There's another one here. We used the white T-shirt as a reference point, and we went from this to that. Old photos, opaque media. Old photos are difficult to deal with. When you have a photo in hand, it's inherently a low resolution image. And so you want to scan that into a computer, you're not going to change a silk purse into a sow's ear. If you're scanning photos, you can do 5 by 7s at 600 samples per inch, larger photos at 300 samples per inch. And that will give you acceptable file sizes for what you need. If you want really good scans, you can double those figures, but I don't know if it's really necessary. Flatbed scanners do a reasonably good job for photos. The JPEG is okay because there's no additional information to be gleaned from a photograph. Here's the range of scanning protocols you might use or you might encounter. This is what I recommend. Scans in the range of 2,000 to 3,000 samples per inch. If you can get 8-bit TIFF, good. If you get 16-bit TIFF, even much better. If you want to produce a really good scan, and Scan Cafe says they offer it, but right now I don't know. They're in the doghouse. But you must have scratch and dust removal. If the vendor doesn't offer scratch and dust removal, pick somebody else. Here's my preferences. 3,000 samples per inch, scratch and dust removal, JPEG plus TIFF, Scan Cafe, but send them a trial sample first. If they do okay on the trial sample, then you can send a bigger order. But I do like Kristen Goodman locally and Digify in New York. I do most of my own scanning myself with the Nikon Super Cool Scan 5000.
Now, when they respond to you,
I've spoken at Scan Cafe.
and when they respond and send you back an example of what it's going to look like before you
Yeah, they
say go
do.
ahead with all the rest of them,
They do.
how do you see that? Are you looking at that? Do they send it back to you in an email or?
Yeah, they send an email saying your scan is ready, and then you go online. And you look at your image, but you can't download them. And they're low res, but you can get an idea if this is what I want, or Scan Cafe allows you a 20% reject rate. You can also specify additional restoration for some films if you want more restoration. So they do give you choices. And it could be useful if they ever get their act together. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Conrad,
Yeah, Jerry.
many years ago, I scanned lots and lots of slides. You said you do it yourself. It takes a lifetime.
No, I figure about 1.5 minutes per scan.
Yeah.
And I load them into a feeder that has the capacity of 50 scans, 50 films.
Okay,
And then I can do other things while it's scanning.
okay.
So I wait till it's all done and then I look again.
Because when I was doing it, I was lifting my flatbed, and I was putting my
I know.
negatives in and putting it down.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, get a life.
Yes?
I've got 54 Kodak carousels. I've got 54 Kodak carousels. Okay?
Yeah.
And, I mean, I've culled them down probably to the equivalent of 40.
Well,
That's a big number. Okay, so I'm interested in preserving them on DVD. So you recommend Scan Cafe or somebody else?
Well, as I said, if they ever get their act together, they'll be good. I just don't know because my experience with them is so bad. But they should be good in principle. And I'm going to say that perhaps there's one individual who just did it all wrong and whatever.
I spoke to someone in Rochester, New York, who's another company that he runs on his own, but at 85 cents a scan, he was bragging that he does not send them to India, he does everything himself.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't remember his name.
Oh, well.
That I thought was fairly expensive.
Yeah.
What do they charge, what do the people locally charge?
Well, I don't know what they charge for slides. For photos, it was that $100 for 500 photos. So that's 20 cents a piece. And probably a competitive rate for the slides.
You didn't talk about Costco.
Yeah. Costco does a nice job. I think they use, and you correct me if I'm wrong on this, Bob, I think they use dye sublimation printing.
I have no idea. I print my own.
Oh, okay. But Costco does a nice job, and the images are flat, they're not curled, they're pretty good. Yeah?
Hi, what would be the maximum, like, SPI image so that you could, from a slide, so that they could be enlarged in any format?
Well, 4,000 samples per inch is going to be an upper limit. Above that point, film has a natural grain, and you'll be reproducing grain, or you'll be reproducing clumps of pigment, but you're not producing any more useful information. So 4,000 samples per inch is about as much as you'd want to do.
So if I wanted a really large format to print, large print, I'd need to keep the slide.
Well, you're stuck. What you can do, you can say, well, I'm going to view this print from 6 feet away, and therefore you could go way down in the acceptable dots per inch of that print. So you maximize the scanning sampling, but you print at, say, 100 dots per inch, and you'll get probably an acceptable image for viewing at a distance. Yeah?
If I were to send like the 500 photos to the local person, would they send that back to me on a DVD or on a hard drive, or do you tell them which to do that?
I don't know.
Okay.
So, probably DVD, but I'm not sure. But you can always walk to Costco and buy your DVD.
Right.
I'm going to buy your hard drive and say, here's a hard drive, put them on here, they do that for you.
Then you wouldn't have to transfer them again.
Right.
Yeah. I have another question.
Yeah.
Is there an issue with very bold photos when you have them scanned, like the old sepia and black and whites and so forth? Something that you have to be concerned about, or do they?
I think that's why we deal locally. I kind of, you could send them away and they all advertise that they do a good job and they all show fantastic reproductions that they've corrected for. That may be true, but I just don't know. It's nice to have some direct input, and that's why I recommended that other place in New York City, because they are real live people who can communicate with you. I thought I saw a question.
Will we get a discount if we mention your name?
Don had a question.
Bob?
In the back.
When you view the results, do you control your lighting?
I try to. In my den, I have 6,000 degree Kelvin lighting. And I've sort of calibrated my monitor. My monitor is probably a weak point right now. But I try to match a calibrated monitor with the viewing conditions that I should be using. That answers your question.
You've got somebody in the back.
Yeah?
How about for those of us who have, all our photos are on those film strips? Can you get those, you have to have the whole strip?
You mean
I mean, obviously, they're not going to select, number 36 here.
No, in the old days, you used to get get back 4 at a time. Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
Yeah, they have to do all 4. You can't give them a choice. Yeah.
Is the cost the same, and does Kristen do that?
Yeah, that's what they recommend is 4 at a time. If you get 2 or 1, they're hard to handle and they may not do it or do it wrong.
Right, but does the local girl, Kristen, does she take those too, or just slides? Photos?
Well, as I said, her own specialty is photos, but she sends the slides out. So I presume the slides are film strips, the Kodacolor strips, the color negative strips.
But she would take those and send, she would handle those, send them out?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
This local gal does her own printing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I have glass plates, black and white glass plates, negative plates that my
Yeah.
grandfather did. Do you know if she does that kind of work?
I would think so. Bob, do you have any suggestions? I
I
think
know
so.
of two printers in town who are excellent. One is Dennis Goodman, and the other is High Tech. H-I-T-A-E-K. And they are specializing on all kinds of substrates.
Where are they located?
They just moved.
They just moved.
Corporate Drive or something?
Yeah, Corporate Square.
Square.
Corporate Square. But you Google H-I-T-E-K Tech.
Excuse me, what was the name of that place?
High Tech.
High Tech.
H-I-T-E-K.
E-K.
H-I-T.
You always refer to we.
And
Who's the other one?
Maybe I misunderstood you or something.
No, when you were referring, you said, we did this. Who's we? You and your wife?
Probably. Yes, it was.
So
Yeah.
she's into this also.
Oh, no. But some of those pictures were.
He just includes me as a nicety.
Okay.
So, some of those pictures were in Greece from about 15 years ago. That's what we did.
about High Tech, the guy who does the printing there, his name is Curtis, and refer to me if you will call him.
Yeah, I think just before it comes to slides, and have to made into pictures. Didn't really.
Yeah, they do on tiles. I have pictures that were hanging here on acrylic and on aluminum, and they're excellent. Both those printers are excellent.
Any more questions? Let's, the Dorners, you guys want to come up together?
Me?
This is
We're not
George's
gonna-
project.
We're not going to have a pokey up there?
Well, the pictures I found, or the picture you're going to see, they're 25 years old.
Slides.
Huh?
There were slides.
Slides. I took the slides and I downloaded them.
Anyway, we got a flatbed screen scanner. It's an Epson V600. It goes very fast, but we can only do 4 at a time. But by the time we get the next one organized, the 4 are done. So,
Your phone hit the deck.
So you scan slides?
That's what we're doing.
These slides?
so, and then George made it into a little 4-minute program just because he was so impressed with the quality of the slides.
What is it? It's Epson what?
It's
V600, right?
Yeah.
there.
Epson
I have had
V600.
scanners forever, but they were never this fast as this one is. But I have used that Nikon with the, where you can do 50 slides, although I did have to I found myself sitting next to that scanner because it does jam once in a while.
You what?
Jams once in a while, so you have to be, you don't go out of the room forever and just, I don't know what would happen with the slides. I think it took about an hour to do, how many slides?
Oh, around 100 slides.
100 slides, it took us an hour.
It goes very
But
quick.
of course, he's like some of these other people, he has boxes and boxes and boxes.
So,
So we will not live long enough.
so
to
you
get all
didn't,
of it.
you didn't edit these at all?
Not at all.
Very good. Slideshow, for transition settings. Put it in title.
The quality on our.
And quality was terrible,
is,
but the hour really
He
shot.
doesn't have the volume all the way up. It's the original code, it's the original slide, which is nice. I don't believe in it, unless you're sending it to the people magazine, just let's see the original.
The color in this is completely different than what I see in a computer.
Oh. Why is that? I wonder why that is.
Projector.
Yeah, probably because, George just said, probably because of the projector, the color's not quite as good as.
And it's a lot sharper than what we're having here. It's only 4 minutes long, so. This is up in Sedona, Oak Creek Canyon, Arizona.
It's like TCM. Well, it's actually my question. I don't want to throw a slide on it. I understand it. If it's only meant for
50 years old, and they had lost their color. These are 25 years old.
Not send these out to anybody?
No, I didn't. The slides, there were slides and I scanned them into the computer.
But did you edit them?
No.
No.
So he didn't edit any of them.
Does a feeder come along with the scanner?
Conrad, you edit
There's a
everything.
template that goes onto the scanner. You fill each hole up
Depends
with
how
your
full the
slide.
slides out, how much editing you have to do.
You just close it down and press start with the scanner. And then you pick it up and the fourth slide you pick up all of it.
Can you use this scanner for anything other than
Oh, yeah.
slides?
Oh, yeah.
Pictures, you can do photographs, you
Oh,
can
you do anything.
Documents?
I just made these slides.
Does that
do, you
holder
can
come
do
with?
negatives.
Yes. Oh, yeah. All the pictures.
You say it's Epson,
Negatives.
Epson.
Epson, B.
Okay, thank you.